bacteria start moving in. Some come from your mother, others from the world around you. As you grow, your microbiome becomes uniquely yours. Like a bacterial fingerprint shaped by where you live and what you eat. In your gut alone, there are more bacterial cells than stars in the galaxy, each one playing a role in your daily health. These microbes talk to your brain. Through the gut-brain axis, they can influence mood, memory, and even decisions. Some scientists call your gut the second brain, because these bacteria produce neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine. That means your happiness may start in your intestines. Feeling anxious? It might be your microbes sending signals. Antibiotics, while life-saving, can wipe out good bacteria. A single dose can set your microbiome back for weeks. Processed foods and sugar can harm your gut flora. Fiber, fermented foods, and diversity in diet feed the good bacteria. Stress can also weaken your microbial defenses. Sleep, meditation, and healthy routines keep them thriving. There's even research suggesting your microbiome affects weight. Some people gain more from the same meal just because of their bacteria. In fact, lean and obese individuals have very different microbiomes. And fecal transplants have shown promising results in changing metabolism. Your skin has its own microbial community. These bacteria protect against infections and balance your skin's health. Every handshake, kiss, or shared space exchanges bacteria. We are constantly blending ecosystems with those around us. Your pets influence your microbiome too. People with dogs tend to have more diverse gut bacteria. Even the air you breathe carries microbes. Cities, forests, oceans, each environment shares its own bacterial signature. Modern hygiene has its costs. While it prevents disease, it also reduces exposure to helpful microbes. Rural kids tend to have stronger immune systems than urban ones. Early exposure to a wide range of bacteria may prevent allergies and autoimmune issues. Farming communities have lower rates of asthma, all thanks to dirt and animal microbes training their immune systems. Scientists are exploring ways to restore microbiome balance. Probiotics, prebiotics, and even customized bacterial therapies are in development. In the future, we may treat depression or obesity with bacteria. Imagine a pharmacy of microscopic allies tailored just for you. Your body is not just yours. It's a vast ecosystem, a living planet of bacterial life. You are more bacteria than human. But maybe that's not a bad thing at all. Like, subscribe, and share if you're ready to embrace your inner microbes. Alexander was born in the year 356, before the Common Era, in the city of Pella, Macedonia, into a world of blood and ambition. His father, King Philip II, was a ruthless strategist who dreamed of conquering Greece. His mother, Olympias, was fierce and deeply religious. She told her son he was descended from Achilles and fathered by Zeus. As a child, Alexander tamed a wild horse named Bucephalus, the only one brave enough to ride it. His father said, "Macedonia is too small for you." At 13, he was sent to study under Aristotle. He absorbed knowledge of philosophy, warfare, medicine, and the epic tales of Homer. Alexander slept with a copy of the Iliad under his pillow. Achilles became his role model, a warrior who sought glory above all. By 16, Alexander was left to rule Macedonia as regent, while Philip campaigned elsewhere. He crushed a Thracian revolt and founded a city in his name. At 18, he fought beside his father at the Battle of Chaeronea. He led the left wing and shattered the sacred band of Thebes. In 336 BC, Philip was assassinated at a royal wedding. Alexander seized the throne immediately, eliminating rivals before they could act. The Greek city-states saw an opportunity to break free. Alexander marched south and razed Thebes to the ground, killing thousands and enslaving the rest. With Greece secured, he declared war on Persia. It was a bold move. The Persians had the largest empire on earth. In 334 BC, he crossed the Hellespont into Asia. He visited the supposed site of Troy and paid tribute to Achilles at his tomb. At the Battle of the Granicus River, he led a charge across the water against Persian forces. His men urged caution, but he wanted victory through boldness. The Persians fell back in chaos, and Alexander claimed his first major victory. He spared captured Greek mercenaries, but executed their Persian officers. He moved through Asia Minor, liberating Greek cities and gaining allies. His army grew stronger with every town he took. At Gordium, he faced the legendary Gordian knot. Rather than solve it, he cut it in half with his sword, fulfilling the prophecy in his own way. Meanwhile, Darius III prepared a massive army to crush him. The two armies met near Issus, where the terrain favored Alexander's smaller force. Alexander's cavalry slammed into the Persian center. Darius fled the battlefield, leaving his mother, wife, and children behind. Instead of abusing his victory, Alexander treated the captured women with honor. Word spread that this young king was unlike any other. He turned south toward Egypt, conquering coastal cities along the way. Tyre resisted, so Alexander built a causeway to reach it. The siege of Tyre lasted 7 months. When the city finally fell, he slaughtered 8,000 men and sold 30,000 into slavery. Arriving in Egypt, he was welcomed as a liberator. He founded the city of Alexandria, destined to become a center of learning and trade. At the Oracle of Siwa, deep in the desert, priests declared him the son of Zeus Ammon. The prophecy confirmed his divine right to rule. Alexander still had much more to accomplish. He marched to meet Darius again, this time at Gaugamela. The Persians outnumbered him 5-1. With brilliant tactics, he broke through the Persian lines and went straight for Darius. Once again, the Persian king fled. Alexander marched into Babylon and was crowned King of Kings. The treasures of the empire were his. He moved through Susa and into Persepolis, the ceremonial capital. There, in a drunken frenzy, he set the palace ablaze. Some said it was revenge for Persia's burning of Athens a century earlier. Others said it was madness. Alexander now ruled the largest empire in history, but he wasn't finished. He wanted to push east, to the edges of the known world. In Bactria, he fought brutal guerrilla campaigns in freezing mountains. He took a local wife, Roxana, to help secure his hold. But trouble brewed among his men. They were weary, cold, and homesick, and didn't like seeing Alexander adopt Persian customs. He began dressing like a Persian king and demanded to be worshipped as a god. Many saw this as betrayal. Some plotted against him. His closest friend Clytus criticized him drunkenly, and Alexander killed him in rage. Haunted by the murder, Alexander fell into deep despair. He isolated himself more and more. He marched into India, facing King Porus and his war elephants at the Battle of the Hydaspes. It was one of his bloodiest battles. The river swelled from heavy rains, and the elephants caused chaos. But Alexander's tactics won the day. Porus was captured, but impressed him so much that Alexander let him keep his kingdom. It was a rare moment of respect. His men, exhausted and fearful, refused to go any farther east. After 8 years of campaigning, they demanded to return home. Alexander reluctantly agreed. The journey back through the Gedrosian desert was catastrophic. Heat and thirst killed thousands. His army limped back to Babylon, broken but victorious. Alexander began planning new conquests: Arabia, North Africa, even Rome. He dreamed of a single world empire. Like most of us in our short lives, he did not get to finish all he set out for. He fell ill after a banquet. 10 days later, he was dead. He was only 32. The cause of death remains one of history's great mysteries. He left no legitimate heir. His generals, the Diadochi, divided his empire and descended into war. Yet his legacy endured. Over 20 cities bore his name, the greatest of them Alexandria. Greek became the language of science, philosophy, and trade from Egypt to India. This era became known as the Hellenistic Age. In some places he was remembered as a god, in others a tyrant. But in every corner of the known world, people remembered his name. Alexander the Great. He conquered more than just land. He conquered time. Hit that like button if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe to see more. Share to support the channel. Thank you for stopping by. Knowing things is power. In the year 1726, two noblemen stood face to face at dawn, pistols in hand. They weren't fighting over politics or power. They were dueling over a dessert. A pie so luxurious, so rare and so personal that one man was willing to die for it. This is the story of a fatal recipe. A tale of stolen pride, almonds and blood on the cobblestones. The man who started it all was Lord Algernon Blackstone, a lover of French cuisine and rumoured to be obsessed with perfecting a single dish. An almond tart with a honey glaze scented with citrus and rose. He served it at a private dinner for a royal envoy. And the pie was the star of the night. But among the guests was Sir Geoffrey Hale, a rival noble known for his own culinary ambitions. Days later, the exact same pie appeared at a banquet thrown by Sir Geoffrey. Same crust, same fragrance, same garnished almonds, arranged in a perfect spiral. Lord Algernon was enraged. He accused Geoffrey publicly of stealing the recipe. Tempers flared, insults flew, and the only proper course of action for gentlemen of the time was a duel. At sunrise, they met in Hyde Park. Witnesses say Algernon fired first and missed. Geoffrey's shot struck true. Algernon fell. Geoffrey lived, and the pie lived on with him. Now, centuries later, we can bring it back. Let's make the almond pie that sparked a noble feud. Start with one pie crust, either puff pastry or buttery short crust. In a bowl, combine 1 cup of almond flour, half a cup of sugar and half a cup of softened butter. Blend until creamy. Add 2 eggs, the zest of 1 lemon and a teaspoon of rosewater. If you want a deeper flavor, add a pinch of clove or cinnamon. Mix it all until smooth and fragrant. Pour the filling into your pie crust and spread it evenly. Bake at 350 degrees Fahrenheit or 175 Celsius for about 30 to 35 minutes until golden on top. Let it cool, and if you're feeling fancy dust with a little powdered sugar, take a bite and you'll taste why this dish was worth fighting for. It's soft but rich, floral and nutty with a light citrus lift. You get the sense that this was more than dessert. It was status, it was skill. It was pride on a plate. The pie didn't just end a life, it created a legacy. And now you've brought that taste of history back to life. If you enjoyed this story and want to taste more of the past, hit that like button, subscribe for more, and share this with someone who'd duel over dessert. This is Tasting History, where every bite tells a story.
China's story begins over 5,000 years ago along the Yellow River. The Xia, Shang, and Zhou dynasties laid the roots of civilization with bronze tools, ancestor worship, and written characters. They believed rulers held a divine right called the Mandate of Heaven. It could be revoked through corruption or failure. The Zhou dynasty saw the birth of Confucianism and Taoism. These philosophies still influence Chinese society today. The Qin dynasty rose through violence and unity. Emperor Qin Shi Huang conquered rival states, burned books, and buried scholars alive. He forced millions to build roads, canals, and the First Great Wall. His tomb still holds the silent army of terracotta warriors. The Han dynasty brought stability, expansion, and glory. Silk flowed west to Rome, paper was invented, and Confucianism became law. Yet rebellion and famine eventually ended the Han's golden age. China shattered into chaos once again. The Three Kingdoms period followed and became legendary in Chinese folklore. It was a time of endless war and heroic generals. The Tang dynasty became a cultural superpower. Poetry and cosmopolitanism thrived as China reached new heights. China's capital, Chang'an, became one of the largest and most advanced cities on Earth. Foreign traders and scholars came from across Asia and the Middle East. The Song dynasty followed with inventions like gunpowder and printing presses. They created the first government-issued paper money in history. Their navy was advanced and powerful, but political weakness invited invasion. In the 1200s, the Mongols stormed across the steppes. Genghis Khan's grandson, Kublai Khan, conquered China and founded the Yuan dynasty. Trade expanded across Asia and Europe, but Mongol rule brought heavy taxes and deep resentment. The Ming dynasty rose in rebellion and restored Chinese rule. They rebuilt the Great Wall and sent Admiral Zheng He's fleets across the oceans. His ships reached India, Arabia, and East Africa. They were larger than any European fleet at the time. Then they turned inward out of fear of foreign influence. Isolation and corruption weakened the state from within. The Qing dynasty emerged from Manchuria and conquered Beijing. They expanded China to its greatest size, including Tibet, Xinjiang, Mongolia, and Taiwan. The empire ruled over many ethnic groups. Han Chinese, Manchus, Mongols, Tibetans, and Muslims all lived under Qing control. By the 1800s, the empire stagnated. The West forced China open through war and opium. The Opium Wars with Britain shattered Chinese sovereignty. Western powers carved spheres of influence and took Hong Kong. Millions became addicted to British opium. The Chinese emperor's pleas were ignored. The Qing tried to reform but failed. The Boxer Rebellion was crushed by foreign armies. In 1911, revolution ended 2,000 years of imperial rule. The Republic of China was declared under Sun Yat-sen. But democracy collapsed into warlord chaos. Out of this storm emerged the nationalists and the communists. Japan invaded China in the 1930s. The Nanjing Massacre left hundreds of thousands dead. Civilians were slaughtered and women were raped. Entire districts were destroyed. Nationalists and communists briefly united to fight Japan, but once the war ended, civil war resumed. In 1949, Mao Zedong's communists seized Beijing. Chiang Kai-shek and the nationalists fled to Taiwan. Two Chinas were born. Both claimed to be the real government. Mao launched the Great Leap Forward to modernize agriculture and industry. Instead, it caused the deadliest famine in human history. Up to 45 million people starved to death. Some villages turned to cannibalism in desperation. To tighten control, Mao unleashed the Cultural Revolution. Red Guards destroyed temples and turned children against teachers and parents. Universities closed for years. Ancient knowledge was lost or rewritten. Mao died in 1976, and Deng Xiaoping took power. He opened the economy while keeping the Communist Party in control. Factories boomed and poverty dropped. China's coastal cities became engines of growth. But political freedom never arrived. The party's grip remained firm. In 1989, students filled Tiananmen Square demanding democracy. For days, they protested peacefully beneath a statue of the goddess of democracy. Then the tanks came. Soldiers opened fire on the crowds. The true death toll is unknown. One man stood before a tank and became a symbol around the world. Inside China, the massacre is erased. Searching Tiananmen or Tank Man is blocked. China's digital firewall bans Google, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. The state monitors every post and every phone. Millions use government-run apps that track movement and conversations. Social credit scores affect travel and employment. Meanwhile, Taiwan flourished into a thriving democracy. It holds elections, issues passports, and controls its own military. China still claims Taiwan as a breakaway province. It vows to retake the island by force if necessary. In the South China Sea, China built military bases on artificial islands. It claimed almost the entire region using the 9-dash line. International courts ruled the claim invalid. China refused to back down. Its ships confront Vietnamese and Filipino vessels regularly. Tensions with the United States continue to rise. In Xinjiang, over 1 million Uyghur Muslims have been detained. Reports describe forced labor, brainwashing, and sterilization. Mosques have been demolished. Children are separated from families and sent to state-run boarding schools. The government calls it counterterrorism. Critics call it cultural genocide. Tibet remains under tight control. The Dalai Lama lives in exile and protests are brutally crushed. Religious practices are tightly monitored. Foreign journalists are rarely allowed in. In Hong Kong, protests erupted in 2019 against a new extradition law. China responded with mass arrests and national security crackdowns. Pro-democracy activists have been silenced or exiled. Newspapers have been shut down or censored. The one country, two systems promise is gone. Hong Kong's freedoms are fading fast. Despite controversy, China is rising fast. It leads in AI infrastructure and global influence. The Belt and Road Initiative builds railways, ports, and highways around the world. Some fear it traps nations in debt and dependency. At home, China faces growing pressure. Youth unemployment is rising and censorship tightens. Nationalism is high, but so is unrest. The future remains uncertain. Will China become the world's dominant superpower, or will its internal contradictions bring it down? China's past is vast and violent. Its future could reshape the entire world. Like if you learned something, subscribe to see more. Share to support the channel.
The American Civil War. A brutal conflict that shaped the soul of a nation. This is the story of how the United States of America tore itself apart, and what it took to stitch itself back together. It is a war still misunderstood, still debated, and still alive in the conscience of a country it nearly destroyed. This war was not inevitable, but it was years in the making. It was not simply North against South. It was economy against economy, future against past, and freedom against bondage. Slavery had become the spine of the Southern economy. It was embedded in every law, every institution. Millions of black men, women, and children were considered property. They had no rights, no voice, no protection. Meanwhile, the North was changing rapidly. Factories were rising. Immigrants were pouring in. Cities were growing. There were still racists in the North. But the North did not depend on slavery to survive. And more people were calling for its end. Laws tried to calm the storm. The Missouri Compromise admitted Missouri as a slave state and Maine as free. The Compromise of 1850 included the Fugitive Slave Act, angering many in the North. The Kansas-Nebraska Act opened new lands to slavery by popular vote. Bleeding Kansas erupted in violence. It became clear compromise was failing. In 1857, the Dred Scott decision declared that no black person could ever be a citizen. That decision struck like thunder. It confirmed to millions that the system was deeply corrupted. Then came John Brown, an abolitionist who believed slavery would only end through bloodshed. In 1859, he led a raid on a federal armory at Harper's Ferry. He wanted to spark a slave revolt. He failed and was executed. But in death, he became a symbol, a martyr to abolitionists, a terrorist to the South. The election of 1860 was the final fracture. Abraham Lincoln won the presidency without carrying a single Southern state. The South panicked. They believed Lincoln would abolish slavery outright. South Carolina was the first to leave the Union. 10 more states followed. In early 1861, they formed the Confederate States of America. They elected Jefferson Davis as their president, and they began seizing federal property within their borders. Then came Fort Sumter, a Union fort in the harbor of Charleston, South Carolina. Confederate forces surrounded it and demanded surrender. When the Union refused, they opened fire. The American Civil War had begun. Many believed the war would last weeks. Instead, it lasted 4 years. It became a grinding, bitter, and costly struggle. At the First Battle of Bull Run, Union troops panicked and fled. It was a wake-up call. The South would not be easily defeated. At Antietam, over 23,000 men were killed, wounded, or missing in a single day. It remains the bloodiest day in American history. The dead lay in rows, unburied, untouched. The scale of death was staggering. Gettysburg saw 3 days of fighting and over 50,000 casualties. It marked the high water mark of the Confederacy. After Gettysburg, the South would never again launch a major offensive in the North. In the West, Union forces captured New Orleans and took control of the Mississippi River. General Ulysses S. Grant laid siege to Vicksburg and starved the city into surrender. This cut the Confederacy in half. General William Tecumseh Sherman then began his march to the sea. He destroyed railroads, burned crops, and tore through Georgia. He practiced total war, aiming to break the South's ability and will to fight. Meanwhile, President Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. It declared that all enslaved people in Confederate states were free. It did not immediately end slavery, but it changed the purpose of the war. Now the Union fought not only for survival, but for freedom. Black men rushed to enlist. Over 180,000 served in the Union Army. They fought with courage. They faced death not only from bullets, but from execution or re-enslavement if captured. Yet they fought. For their people. For dignity. For the future. The Confederacy hoped for help from Europe. They believed cotton would bring them allies. But after the Emancipation Proclamation, Britain and France stepped back. They would not support a war for slavery. The war continued to drag on. The South's resources dried up. Its men were exhausted. Grant pushed forward with relentless pressure. He understood that victory would come not just through strategy, but through attrition. In 1865, Union forces captured Richmond, the Confederate capital. Robert E. Lee tried to escape west, but his army was surrounded. On April 9, 1865, at Appomattox Courthouse, he surrendered to Grant. Just 5 days later, Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, shot in the back of the head at Ford's Theater. He did not live to see the peace he had fought for. The South lay in ruins. Cities were burned. Fields left fallow. Millions of people were dead, wounded, orphaned, or traumatized. Slavery was abolished by the 13th Amendment. But freedom did not bring equality. Racism remained deeply rooted. Reconstruction began, but it was slow, violent, and fiercely resisted. 1 in every 4 Southern white men of military age had died. Entire communities were wiped out. Tens of thousands of men returned home with missing limbs. Many were never whole again, in body or mind. And the country remained deeply divided. The American Civil War ended on paper. but its consequences are still unfolding. This war forced America to reckon with its original sin. It tore off the mask. It exposed every contradiction. And it demanded that the country choose what it truly believed in. The cost was staggering. But the future was bought with that price. Not all battles are fought with guns, and not all wounds are visible. This was the war that forged modern America, and the memory of it must never fade. Please like, share, and subscribe if you believe in telling the truth behind history. This is the American Civil War, and this is the story that must be remembered. In the beginning, there were no borders, no passports, no races, no languages, just people. Homo sapiens. One species, one ancient family. Born not in a country, but in the cradle of East Africa, 200,000 years ago. They walked upright. They hunted. They loved. They feared the dark. They looked to the stars, even if they did not have words for them. But the earth is vast, and humans wander. They migrated north. They chased game. They chased seasons. They crossed deserts. They climbed mountains. They built boats and found new islands. Every place changed them. Not in spirit, but in body. In the bright sun of the equator, dark skin protected them. A shield against ultraviolet rays. In the cold grey skies of the north, paler skin evolved to soak in every drop of sunlight. Noses narrowed to warm the air, hair coiled to cool the scalp. Bones shifted. Eyes adapted. Generations passed, and nature sculpted us. But race is not ancient. It is not scientific. It is not written in stone. Race is a story, told by empires, by colonizers, by people who wanted to divide, because biologically, humans are almost the same. More similar than wolves, more similar than apes. There is only one human race. We just wear different skin. But something else was changing too. Something powerful and invisible. Language. At first it was sound. A grunt. A cry. A warning. Then rhythm. Then meaning. Then explosion. Clicks. Tones. Songs. Words. Language bloomed. It spread. It multiplied. It became over 7,000 forms of saying, I am here. I am alive. How did that happen? As we spread out, we changed how we spoke. We gave names to rivers. We told stories about stars. We described pain. We made poetry. Small groups created dialects. Dialects became languages. Languages became cultures. Words became legacy. But like race, language is not fixed. It moves. It evolves. It dies. It is born again. English is a good example. It is Germanic. It is Latin. It is French. It is Norse. It is messy. And it is everywhere. Language built everything. Laws. Books. Memories. Songs. Myths. Promises. But if language is how we speak, and race is how we look, then humanity is how we feel. Joy. Pain. Hope. Grief. These do not need translation. From Ethiopia to Iceland, from Mongolia to Brazil, from deserts to ice, from temples to cities, we all cry the same. We laugh the same. We bury our dead the same. We are not strangers. We are reflections. So if you ask, why do we look so different? Why do we speak in so many ways? The answer is simple. We adapted. We survived. We changed. But we never stopped being one. We are the children of Earth, written in 7,000 languages, painted in every color, lived by 8 billion souls, still one. Hit like if you enjoyed this, sub to see more, share to support the channel. Throughout history, war has taken many forms. But perhaps no kind of battle tests the human spirit more than a siege. Trapped within walls, cut off from food, hope, and reinforcements. A siege is not just a battle of weapons, it is a battle of patience, fear, and survival. These are the greatest sieges in history. The siege of Troy, the Greeks versus the Trojans. It began with the abduction of Helen, and it lasted 10 years. The Greeks laid siege to Troy in a campaign filled with duels, deception, and death. Legends say it ended with the famous Trojan horse, a gift left at the city gates, hiding Greek soldiers within. When night fell, Troy was betrayed from the inside and burned to the ground. The siege of Babylon, the Persians versus the Babylonians. Cyrus the Great of Persia faced one of the most fortified cities in the world. Babylon's walls were tall, wide, and guarded by the Euphrates River. But Cyrus diverted the river and marched his army through the dry bed at night. The city fell without a fight. It was one of the most brilliant siege tactics in ancient history. The siege of Syracuse, the Greeks and Carthage combined versus the Roman Republic. During the Second Punic War, the Roman Republic attacked the Greek city of Syracuse. But the defenders had a secret weapon, Archimedes. The great inventor created catapults, mirrors, and defensive machines to hold off the Romans for nearly 2 years. Eventually, the city fell, and Archimedes was killed by a Roman soldier, despite orders to keep him alive. The Siege of Masada, Zealots versus the Roman Empire. In the deserts of Judea, a group of Jewish rebels held out against the Roman Empire atop a desert plateau. The Romans built a massive ramp over months to breach the fortress. But when they arrived, they found silence. Nearly 1,000 defenders had taken their own lives rather than be captured. It remains one of the most haunting sieges in history. The Siege of Constantinople, the Byzantine Empire versus Persians. The capital of the Byzantine Empire was tested more than once. In 717 it held firm against Arab forces. But in 1453 it faced the full force of the Ottoman Empire. Sultan Mehmed II brought cannons, including the massive bombard that shattered the Theodosian walls. After 53 days, Constantinople fell. The city became Istanbul, and the medieval era came to an end. The Siege of Tenochtitlan, the Aztecs versus the Spanish conquistadors. In the heart of modern-day Mexico, Hernán Cortés led Spanish forces against the Aztec capital. With the help of native allies and aided by disease, the Spanish laid siege to the island city. The canals turned red. Famine and smallpox ravaged the defenders. After 93 days, the Aztec Empire collapsed. The Siege of Vienna, Austrians versus the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire reached the gates of Europe's core. Vienna was surrounded. But a massive relief force led by Polish King Jan Sobieski launched the largest cavalry charge in history. The siege was broken. It marked the high water mark of Ottoman expansion into Europe. The Siege of Leningrad, Nazi Germany versus the Russians. Nazi Germany surrounded the Soviet city of Leningrad for nearly 900 days. In the freezing cold, over 1 million civilians died from starvation, shelling, and disease. Yet the city never surrendered. It was one of the longest and most tragic sieges in modern warfare. The Siege of Stalingrad, Nazi Germany versus Russians. Stalingrad wasn't a siege by walls, but by sheer destruction. Germany's Sixth Army pushed deep into the Soviet Union. But Soviet forces refused to break. Urban warfare took over, room by room, floor by floor. Eventually, Germany's army was surrounded and forced to surrender. It was the turning point of World War II. The Siege of Dien Bien Phu, Vietnamese versus the French. In the jungles of Vietnam, French forces set up a base at Dien Bien Phu. They believed they were safe, but the Viet Minh surrounded them in the hills and brought in heavy artillery. After 57 days, the French surrendered. It marked the end of French colonial rule in Indochina and the rise of the Vietnam War. The Siege of Sarajevo, Bosnia Civil War. In the Bosnian War, the capital city of Sarajevo was trapped for almost 4 years. Snipers targeted civilians. Artillery rained down on homes, schools, and hospitals. More than 10,000 people died, many of them children. It was the longest siege of a capital city in modern warfare. Sieges are not always won by force. Sometimes they are won by will. By the refusal to surrender. By hope that holds out even when the walls begin to crumble. From ancient stone cities to modern skylines, sieges have shaped the course of human history. Hit that like button if you enjoyed this. Subscribe to see future content. Sharing is caring. Once upon a time in old Europe, people started dying mysteriously and in large numbers. And the explanation, according to many, was not disease or bad sanitation. It was vampires. Yes, vampires. Dead people rising from the grave, sneaking into homes and draining the life from their neighbors. This wasn't just folklore whispered around campfires. Entire villages believed it. So did nobles, priests, and even doctors. The symptoms they saw: pale skin, weight loss, coughing up blood. Today we call that tuberculosis. Back then it was textbook vampire behavior. So what did they do about it? They grabbed shovels, marched to the graveyards, and started digging people up. Once they opened a coffin, the body was judged on appearance. If it wasn't decomposing fast enough, that meant it was undead. Sometimes the stomach was bloated or there was blood at the mouth. Instead of realizing that these were normal signs of decomposition, they assumed the corpse had been feeding. So they acted. They removed hearts, cut off heads, drove stakes through chests, shoved garlic in mouths, and occasionally they poured boiling wine over the body for good measure. Because clearly vampires hate hot drinks. In some cases, they ground up the heart into ashes and made the family drink it. Because if grandma's dying, the logical solution is to make her sip vampire dust. Medical science was still on vacation. One of the most famous cases happened in 1725 in Serbia. A man named Petar Blagojevich died, and soon after, 9 others followed. Locals said Petar had returned from the dead and attacked them. When they opened his grave, they claimed he looked too fresh and had blood on his lips. So they staked him and burned the body. The story spread across Europe, causing full-on vampire hysteria. Even the church stepped in, not because of the grave digging, but because vampires didn't fit the religious narrative. The church believed the dead should stay dead or wait peacefully for resurrection. Rising from the grave to bite your cousin didn't fit the theology. Eventually, science caught up. Doctors realized that tuberculosis, decomposition, and poor hygiene were to blame, not the undead. But by then, the vampire myth had taken hold. In 1897, Bram Stoker published Dracula and changed everything. Now, vampires had class. They wore capes, lived in castles, and made being undead look kind of cool. Fast forward to today. Vampires star in movies, TV shows, novels, video games, and Halloween costumes. They sparkle, smolder, and occasionally sell car insurance. But the truth behind their origin: it's a panic that came from fear, misunderstanding, and a complete lack of germ theory. So are vampires real? No. But the panic was. The superstition was. People truly believe this stuff. And that belief shaped part of our history. If you enjoyed this, hit like. Subscribe to see future videos. And share to support the channel. Because knowing things is power.
In the final days of World War II, as the world burned and then began to rebuild, one man remained hidden in the shadows of the Philippine jungle, a soldier who refused to surrender because in his heart the war was not over. His name was Hiru Onoda. A lieutenant in the Imperial Japanese Army, trained in intelligence and survival, he was ordered to hold his ground on Lubang Island, no matter how long it took. Retreat was not an option. Surrender was forbidden. Death was preferable to dishonor. When the war officially ended in 1945, millions celebrated peace. But Onoda never got the message. Leaflets were dropped. Loudspeakers called out. Newspapers were left behind. He thought it was all enemy propaganda. In his mind, the fight still raged on. For years, he evaded capture, living in the dense jungle, surviving on bananas, coconuts, and stolen rice, making traps, hiding in the mountains, engaging in gunfire with locals. He became a ghost story, part myth, part menace, part miracle. Decades passed. The world changed. Japan rose from the ashes. The Cold War ignited. Man walked on the moon. And still, Hiroo Onoda remained in the jungle, believing he was still a soldier of war. It wasn't until 1974, nearly 30 years after Japan surrendered, that a young Japanese traveler named Norio Suzuki set out to find him, not to arrest him, not to capture him, but to listen to him. To honor his story. To bring him home. But even then, Onoda refused to surrender. Not without orders from his commanding officer. That officer had long since returned to civilian life. But the Japanese government tracked him down, now an elderly bookseller, and flew him to Lubang Island. Standing face to face with his former superior, Hiroo Onoda finally accepted the truth. The war had ended. He removed his uniform, polished his sword, and after 29 years in hiding, saluted the rising sun one final time. He returned to Japan as a national hero, celebrated by some, questioned by others, revered by all who heard his unbelievable story. Onoda's tale is not just about war. It's about duty, belief, honor, and the power of a human being to endure beyond reason. In a world that often forgets the past, Hiroo Onoda reminds us what it means to truly never give up, even when the whole world moves on without you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story if it moved you, because the world needs to remember legends like Hiroo Onoda.
The Wild West wasn't built with rules. It was carved out of chaos, grit, and the promise of something better, even if it killed you. It began with a gun in one hand and a dream in the other. Millions moved west, chasing gold, land, or freedom. What they found was a land untamed, where the law came second to survival, and every sunrise might be your last. Outlaws roamed like wolves, armed, hunted, and unafraid. Jesse James wasn't born evil. He was made by war. As a teenager, he fought in brutal guerrilla units during the Civil War. Afterward, he led a gang that robbed banks, trains, and anything else that moved. But Jesse didn't run. He wrote letters to newspapers justifying every heist. The people didn't see a criminal. They saw a modern Robin Hood. He was betrayed by his own gang, shot in the back of the head while adjusting a picture on the wall, by a man who wanted the reward money more than his loyalty. Billy the Kid was lightning in a human body. He danced between jail cells and gunfights, charming some and terrifying others. He spoke fluent Spanish, sang to children, and smiled before drawing on grown men. He once broke out of a two-story courthouse by killing both his guards and riding off on a stolen horse. His luck ran out in the dark. Sheriff Pat Garrett waited in the shadows and put a bullet through him before he even knew what hit him. He was 21, one kill for every year he lived. But legends weren't just born with bullets. Bass Reeves was a name history nearly buried. Born into slavery, he escaped, lived among native tribes, and taught himself to track like a ghost. He became the first black U.S. Marshal west of the Mississippi. He couldn't read, but he memorized over 3,000 warrants, and he brought them in alive or dead. They say he once arrested his own son for murder. Because out here, justice didn't care about blood. The women of the West were harder than the land they walked. Calamity Jane rode through fire and madness, drank with generals, and fought off Indian attacks with a rifle in one hand and a cigarette in the other. She never married Wild Bill Hickok, but she never stopped loving him. She asked to be buried beside him. She was. Stagecoach Mary broke noses and rules. She delivered mail through blizzards and bandit country. She drank whiskey, chewed cigars, and carried a shotgun under her skirts. When one man called her slow, she knocked out his teeth. The town cheered. Even Belle Starr, the bandit queen, rode with Jesse James and ruled a gang of her own. She wore velvet gowns to court and pistols to dinner. She was murdered on a dirt road, and to this day no one knows who pulled the trigger. And then there was love. The Wild West was brutal, but love still bloomed in saloons, train cars, and tents on the edge of nowhere. Gunfighters wrote poetry. Cowboys whispered dreams under starlit skies. One outlaw, Harry Alonzo Longabore, better known as the Sundance Kid, fell so deeply in love with a schoolteacher, he took her across the world to escape the law. They fled to South America. They died in a shootout in Bolivia. Together. Love didn't soften the West. It made the pain worth surviving. Towns like Deadwood, Tombstone, and Dodge City weren't just backdrops. They were pressure cookers. Lawmen like Wyatt Earp, Bat Masterson, and Wild Bill Hickok walked the tightrope between order and anarchy. The OK Corral shootout lasted just 30 seconds, but it turned into legend. 3 men killed, dozens of lives changed. That's the West. Blink, and your whole world changes. The California Gold Rush brought 300,000 people stampeding westward in search of fortune. Most left with nothing. Some died with gold in their pockets and a knife in their back. And yet, people kept coming. The Transcontinental Railroad stitched the continent together like a wound being sewn shut. But it was built on the backs of immigrants, Chinese workers, Irish laborers, freed slaves. Whole mountains were blasted apart. Towns appeared overnight. Where the train went, civilization followed. And with it, the end of the true Wild West. By 1890, the US Census declared the frontier closed. But the truth is, it never died. The West didn't vanish. It evolved. The grit, the rebellion, the romance, it still runs in American blood. In every underdog, every fighter, every wild heart that refuses to be tamed. The Wild West isn't gone. It's just waiting for the right kind of soul to ride again. If this stirred something in you, like the spirit of the frontier calling across time, smash that like button. Subscribe for more true legends, forgotten heroes, and raw, untamed history that Hollywood could never tell you. They don't teach this in school. They won't mention her in pirate movies. But the greatest pirate to ever live wasn't a man. Her name was Qing Shi. And she ruled the South China Sea with more power than most kings. Born in 1775 in Canton, she started life in a brothel. By the age of 32, she controlled the most feared pirate fleet in history. Her rise began when she married Zheng Yi, a feared pirate captain commanding the Red Flag Fleet. They ruled together for 6 years, conquering rival clans and expanding their influence. But when he died during a storm in 1807, chaos threatened to consume the empire they built. That's when Qingxi took command. She didn't inherit the fleet, she secured it. By forging alliances, bribing key lieutenants and marrying Zheng Yi's adopted son, she ensured full control. This wasn't luck. It was power politics, pirate style. She restructured the entire pirate confederation. 6 fleets, red, black, white, blue, yellow and green, all answered to her. Each had its own admiral, but she commanded them all. She introduced one of the most brutal and effective pirate codes ever written. It enforced order where chaos once ruled. Under her, piracy became an organized business, efficient, ruthless, and terrifying. Her fleet grew to over 800 warships and 80,000 pirates. They attacked imperial convoys, seized merchant vessels, and collected protection money from entire coastal villages. She demanded tribute from major ports. If they refused, she destroyed their ships, burned their docks, and left no survivors. She defeated the Chinese Navy in open water, not once but several times. One legendary clash at the Pearl River Delta saw her fleet smash through a blockade of imperial warships, stealing their cannons and setting fire to their sails. The Qing government begged help from Portugal and Britain. Gunboats arrived. They failed. Qingxi's tactics were unmatched. She used shallow draft ships to escape into coves where larger vessels couldn't follow. She faked retreats, then ambushed pursuing enemies. And she was a master of timing, striking during storms when defenders were weak. Her pirates once raided a salt monopoly warehouse, seizing the entire seasonal supply, then reselling it back to the government at a profit. She didn't just rob. She controlled markets. No one was safe. Fishermen, merchants, nobles, even tax collectors were forced to pay her tribute. She also expanded inland, controlling smuggling routes and punishing towns that resisted. Entire villages relocated to avoid her wrath. But her most surprising move wasn't violence. It was diplomacy. By 1810, the Qing dynasty was desperate. They offered her a full pardon, but she negotiated better. She walked into the Governor-General's palace with her top lieutenants unarmed. She demanded amnesty for her fleet, retention of their wealth, and official military jobs for her officers. She got it all. No execution. No prison. No betrayal. Just total victory. She retired with her fortune, opened a gambling house, and became a respected businesswoman. She raised a family. She lived until the age of 69, something nearly unheard of for pirates. She died peacefully. And history buried her under silence. But the facts remain. She commanded the largest pirate fleet ever recorded. She beat empires, outmaneuvered navies, and walked away untouched. Her name was Qingxi. If you learned something new, hit like. Subscribe for more untold history. And share this to help bring her story to the world.
Before man, before cities, before even the first bird's song, Earth belonged to giants, a world lush with towering ferns, volcanic mountains, and endless swamps teeming with life that time forgot. The skies roared with the wings of pterosaurs, vast and alien, gliding through air thicker and richer than ours today. Beneath them, dense jungles pulsed with ancient sounds, chirps, hisses, bellows, from creatures no human would ever see. Among the trees walked the mighty triceratops, armor-plated and regal, grazing like armored cattle on primeval shrubs. Across the plains, herds of Apatosaurus stretched like living towers, their necks rising above the canopy to feast on treetops no other creature could reach. But not all was peace in this lost world. Lurking in the shadows, velociraptors stalked their prey with chilling precision. Fast, cunning, coordinated. Every leaf rustle could mean death. Every breeze carried the scent of something ancient and hungry. And above them all, the undisputed king, Tyrannosaurus Rex, thundered through the land with jaws strong enough to crush bone and a gaze that froze everything in its path. Yet even he was not alone in the hunt. The oceans hid terrors of their own. Mosasaurus, the marine giant, waiting in prehistoric seas that shimmered with alien blues and bioluminescence. From desert cliffs to mist-choked valleys, Earth was a mosaic of untamed beauty and brutal survival. Giant insects buzzed through the air,